Hello, I'd like to welcome everybody to the Dove Hunting 101 webinar. I'm taking a look at the attendees that are slowly streaming in here. So we will get started officially here in just a sec as that number starts to even out. Right now, it looks like we got a little over 30 people online right now. As we do some introductions here, I'd like to just share some information on how we're gonna do this webinar tonight and how everyone can kind of tie in with us. So this is a Zoom webinar. We've got several panelists that all kind of talk about different topics tonight. The topics we're going to be talking about, we're going to talk about Dove ID, recognizing habitat. We'll get into the gear that you might use for dove hunting. We'll get into tips, the tactics, the decoys. That it's always fun to buy extra gear and use decoys out there. We'll get into the regulations. We want you to be confident when you go out in the field that you're doing things right. We'll talk about safety. Safety is always important when you get out hunting. And then we're going to talk about where you get to go hunting towards the end. At the very end of this webinar, we're going to be doing a Q&A session. So I have disabled the chat for the attendees. Anyone that's viewing this, I've disabled the chat. But you should have a Q&A box in order to ask questions, and then we can kind of look at those questions and try and answer those. If it's a question that's for the benefit of the whole group, we can send a response, and then everybody can read the answer that we send. So as an attendee, if you see the Q&A box down at the very bottom, you'll see that there's a couple of options. You can ask the questions, but you can also see the answers that are there. I do ask that if you got questions that we're going to cover later on, let's wait to ask those questions. So if you got a question about safety, let's wait until after we cover the safety topic. If you got a question about where do I go hunt doves, let's wait until we cover that. So towards the end of the session, and you got questions that we haven't covered, please put those into the Q&A session, and we're going to spend a little bit of time at the end of the webinar. I would like to remind everyone that we are recording this webinar. We hope to post this on our Learn to Hunt webinar on our YouTube playlist. We're going to get going here, and we are going to introduce our speakers. I am Brian Posthumus. I'm going to be the moderator tonight. I am the statewide hunter outreach coordinator. I would like to introduce Mike. Mike, can you introduce yourself?
Good evening, everybody. My name is Mike Grooms. I'm a district wildlife manager in the Greeley South District.
Great, thanks for joining us. Justin, could you introduce yourself, please?
Sure. Hi, all. I'm Justin Bubinick. I'm a volunteer hunter ed instructor with Colorado Parks and Wildlife. My day job is actually a lawyer, but I'm a lifelong bird hunter. Grew up dove hunting and just got a new pup that I'm hoping to take out with me this year.
Great, thank you, Justin. Todd, would you introduce yourself?
Yeah. I'm Todd Kozad. I'm the district wildlife manager in Fort Morgan, Morgan County.
Great. And Pepper, could you introduce yourself?
So I'm Pepper Canterbury. I'm the Northeast Region Hunter Outreach and Angler Outreach Coordinator.
Great. Thank you all for joining us tonight. Looks like we got 44 attendees on the list tonight, so that's great. We got already got a question coming in. When will the walk-in atlas be published? So that's coming out pretty quick here. It's going to be out before dove season starts, 1st September. So I haven't seen it yet come through, but I believe it's going to be in the next, I'm guessing the next week. Any officers hear anything different?
I have not seen it myself. I've had the regular walk-in access, but
okay, so that should be coming out pretty quick. The small game page on our website. If you go to our website, things to do, hunt small game. When the small game walk-in access comes out, we're gonna have a PDF available. The small game waterfowl brochure is already online, and you should be able to find the 2020 small game and waterfowl hunting brochure at any place that sells hunting licenses. So that's available right now. So we are going to get started here with a presentation. So the first thing we're going to talk about is Dove ID and habitat. And Pepper is going to share some PowerPoint slides with us here, and we're probably going to kind of go through some of the PowerPoints, and then we'll be talking in the background.
all right. So There are 3 species of doves that come to Colorado. 2 of them are considered native species, and there's the 3rd that's a non-native species. And so our dove hunting season dates, and Mike will talk about this a little bit more in laws and regulations, but our season dates actually pertain to the mourning doves and the white-winged doves. They do not pertain to the Eurasian collared dove, which is the non-native species. So we're going to go through each one, and I've got a few little photos for each to help you identify the difference, because the bag and possession limits are going to be different for the different species. So first of all is the mourning dove. It's the smallest dove that we have. It's considered a native, and it is managed by our bag and possession limits and season dates. If you look at the coloring, it's a dark gray with kind of a dark mid-gray with a little bit of tan color in it. It's got a cheek patch that you can't see in the picture on the left because the dove's head is crunched down. But there's a little bit of a smudged cheek patch underneath that eye, and you also have the dark spots on the wings that the other doves do not have. The breast and the belly of those mourning doves are more of a buffy color tan, and they've got a long pointed tail. So when they're flying, you'll be able to really tell the difference between the mourning doves and the Eurasian collared doves based on that pointed tail, whereas the collared doves have a long squared end tail. The other thing looked at for and identifying these birds compared to other birds that are out there you might see flying around is their small head compared to the size of their bodies. Mourning doves are about the size of a robin, if you're familiar with American robins, and they still, the American robin is going to have that darker red colored chest, whereas the doves have more of a peach or tan colored chest. Their call is a soft coo that's made from the throat without opening the beak. So you'll actually, if you see them perched and cooing, you'll actually see their throat balloon up and the air is extended out of their beak without their beak opening. And I guess that's about it for the mourning dove. The white-winged dove, you can see in this slide how when it's perched, you'll be able to see that white band on the edge of its wing. And when it's in flight, that white band actually becomes a patch when those coverts are extended out. So you can see, if you can see the bird from the top, or if you see those big white patches on the dove, you know it's a white-winged dove. The tail is shorter. It's still a little pointed. Or no, it's a square tip tail, but it's shorter than the Eurasian collared dove. Other things to look at, which you might not be able to see in flight, is the blue around the eye, kind of a makeup around the eye, but that would be really hard to see in flight. They're medium sized, so they're going to be a little bit bigger than the mourning dove and smaller than the collared dove. Eurasian collared dove has a very distinct crescent, black crescent along the back of its neck, and that's that, and then the long square tipped tail are the real 2 distinguishing factors between all of these birds, and really easy to identify. You can see in flight that Eurasian collared dove has a very distinct black band around the back of its neck. So that identification is really what you want to be looking for if you're targeting the mourning doves. They're also a gray sandy color, and they also do not have that black mark underneath their eye. So look for the collar on the neck versus the black mark under the eye. These Eurasian collared doves are, like I said, are non-native, so we don't have structured season. They're hunted year-round, and you actually do not have to have a hunting license in order to hunt them, and I'll let Mike explain a little bit more of that during his presentation. So some other similar birds that you might want to know identification on, because you're going to see small birds flying all over the place when you're out there hunting, and you want to make sure you're not going to be shooting the wrong species that doesn't actually have a season on it. So we do have a season on band-tailed pigeons, and you can see the difference in that it's very similar in body shape and size to the Eurasian collared dove. But if you look at the color on the back of the band-tailed pigeon, it's actually white instead of black. It's more of a gray color instead of the buffy color, and there's a yellow beak instead of the black beak, and yellow feet. So band-tailed pigeons, we do have a season on them, so you might want to look that up in the regulations and be familiar with them. Kestrels, nighthawks, American robins, and swallows are all similar. You're going to have a bunch of songbirds out there. Maybe go out into the field before you go hunt and start learning how to identify the different birds flying around. You might not be able to identify species, but at least be able to identify whether it's actually a dove or one of these other birds that are out there. As far as habitat goes, and I'm sure that Todd will elaborate on this a little bit more, but for habitat, you want to look for areas that most of these doves live in open woodlands, which we don't have a lot of in Colorado. More what we have are the prairie communities, agricultural lands, riparian areas, and then a combination of the three. So agricultural fields that they use for foraging, they're seed eaters, so they're going to be following areas where there's wheat, millet, sorghum, and sunflowers primarily. And then if you have a field like that next to maybe a stand of trees, either cottonwoods or Russian olives, ornamentals, something that's a shade tree, especially around old homesteads and agricultural fields, those are a good place to check. Windbreaks, the juniper windbreaks, Russian olive windbreaks are great places to go. And they use those trees for nesting, for perching, and for cover from the wind and weather. And then they actually do hang out around residential areas a lot. I'm sure everybody probably has mourning doves waking them, or mourning and collared doves waking them up in the early morning hours, cooing. The other place it's good to find them is along county roads, which we'll discuss in laws and regs as well probably, but along power lines and phone lines, and then county roads, especially where there's a lot of disturbance on the road and sunflowers or agricultural fields growing. You also want to seek out bodies of water. So they do need to drink. They're typically going to drink more in the morning or the evening. And especially on hot days, they're really going to be searching for that water in the evenings. So stock water ponds around agricultural fields and pastures, possibly large stock tanks, lakes, shallow creeks, and any riparian areas are most likely going to have some kind of dove activity in agriculture areas. If you can find a location that has all three elements nearby, you're probably going to have a lot of doves flying around. They don't want to fly more than a couple miles to each element that they need. Seasonality, mourning doves and white-winged doves are more of a species that needs warmer climates. So they're up here in late spring to mid to late fall, and usually around the first of frost, they're going to be wanting to head south. So you can extend your hunting season if you are willing to travel to southern parts of Colorado after the first frost, and in northern Colorado, you can start traveling south and keep following the birds for a little bit longer. But a lot of times after that first frost or that first good freeze, those mourning and white-winged doves are going to head out and seek warmer climates. The Eurasian collared doves will stick out throughout the year in Colorado. Like I said, they're a non-native species, and you can hunt them year-round. So they're more resilient to the cold and a lot more prolific around here. So with that, I will let it go on to Mike, and I'll stop sharing my screen here. So Mike, are you ready?
I am. Okay, so again, I'm Mike Grooms. I'm going to cover just some basic gear tonight regarding dove hunting. So unlike your big game hunting for deer, elk, pronghorn, your gear that you need to have for dove hunting is much more simplified. So first and foremost, you need to have a good equipped shotgun that's functioning well, and also selecting your proper choke tube for that shotgun is also important for your dove hunting. So most modern day shotguns will come with a choke tube of either a full choke, modified, or an improved cylinder. And if you remember from hunter education class, a choke tube basically controls the speed of your shot. So we're going to be hunting these small birds that fly in a very erratic formation in the air. They're very fast in speed. So you're going to want to choose a choke tube that's going to be really forgiving for those fast moving birds. So I would recommend personally probably an improved cylinder, which would be the most forgiving, the most wide open spread of that shot going down range between the full choke, the improved cylinder, and the modified. So I'd recommend an improved cylinder. Shot size, we want to have something that's relatively small because we're hunting a small game bird. I would recommend the shot size of 7, 7.5, or even 8 shot. Depending on the length of the shotgun shell you're using, between a 2 3/4 inch to 3 inch shell, these shells will hold up to 300 pellets in those shot sizes. So you're going to be essentially sending a lot of pellets down range on a small bird using that improved cylinder in your shotgun. Also would recommend, as far as clothing goes, these birds can see colors. So I would recommend using something of camo or earth tone colors on your body while you're hunting the mourning doves, Eurasian, and colored doves this fall. When you're moving between points of location, like from your vehicle to your hunting location, or if you decide you want to leave your current hunting location and move on to a different position in the field, especially when you're hunting on state wildlife areas or walk-in access program properties or even state trust land properties, if it's open to the public, understand that you're going to have a lot of other hunters potentially in that area. And it would be important if you wear an orange hat, or even an orange hat and orange upper body garment when you're moving between locations so other hunters can see you. Again, these birds move really fast and they have a really erratic flight pattern, and sometimes they can fly relatively low to the ground, especially over uncut cornfields and grain fields and through tree cover. So you want to be able to see each other as you're moving around out there in the field. Also, regarding the season, when you're going to start hunting these birds, it's going to be early fall, late summer. So it's going to be relatively hot out still. So you want to have some sunscreen, bug spray, especially the mosquitoes can get pretty bad out there in some locations. Food, water, you're going to want to stay hydrated in the field. And something to sit on, either a bucket that you could put some of your gear in, like your water and snacks and ammo, and carry with you, or something as simple, just a collapsible camp chair or seat that you can sit on, because you're probably going to be stationary for most of the morning or day while you're hunting these birds, and you want to be comfortable. As far as regarding your birds, as far as field dressing and bringing them home after the hunt, you're going to want to have some way to keep that meat cool and dry. So I recommend having a small cooler, some ice or freezer packs in your cooler, and some small Ziploc bags to place those doves or meat in those coolers to keep that meat clean and dry as you're transporting them home. And that is all I have for basic gear.
Mike, would you want to talk about regulations next, and we'll try and come back to the tips, tactics, and decoys when we get Todd coming back in.
Sure, you bet. So this is Mike again. I'm going to cover some just basic laws and regulations regarding dove hunting in Colorado. First and foremost, the season dates for doves is September 1st through November 29th, and that applies to our mourning doves. For your mourning and the white-winged doves is September 1st, November 29th. Eurasian collared doves, again, those are the non-native species, so we have a year-round season on those birds. Hunting hours regarding mourning doves and white-winged and Eurasian collared doves is going to be 1/2 hour before sunrise to sunset. So for any of you big game hunters out there, you're used to the 1/2 hour before sunrise to 1/2 hour after sunset time frame. For migratory bird hunting, it's going to be again 1/2 hour before sunrise to sunset. The bag and possession limits for dove hunting regarding mourning dove and white-winged dove is going to be 15 birds per day, singly or in aggregate. So I want to make it clear the difference between a daily bag limit and a possession limit, what those two things are. And these again will be in your small game brochures, but daily bag limit is going to be the number of birds or fish, if you're fishing, that you can have, each person can have and catch and keep in one single day. Your possession limit is going to be how many of those birds or fish that you can keep at any place at any given time. So possession limit would apply for your motel room if you're traveling on a long weekend hunt, your residence in your freezer, that applies for your possession limit. So it's possession limit per person and daily bag limit per person. So daily bag limit for dove hunting for your mourning doves and white-winged doves, again, is 15 birds per day, singly or in aggregate. So in aggregate, meaning if you were to harvest 10 mourning doves that day, and then 15 white-winged doves that day, that's your 15 birds in aggregate. They're combined together by the two species, or 15 singly per species. So 15 mourning doves per day would be your limit. Plugged shotguns. So it's important to understand that when you're hunting migratory birds in Colorado, that you need to have a plug in your shotgun. So from hunter education, remember that a plug in a semi-automatic or pump action shotgun would be the wood or plastic dowel that goes into the singular or circular magazine in your shotgun, and basically the plug limits the number of shotgun shells you can have in that shotgun. So having a plugged shotgun limits you to 3 rounds at any given time in that gun. So 2 rounds in the magazine, and then 1 round in the chamber. Okay. Oftentimes we check hunters early fall that have spent some time at the trap range to get kind of brushed up on their shooting skills before the September 1st opener of dove, and they take their plugs out of their shotguns at the trap range so they don't have to reload quite as often, and they forget to put the plugs back in their shotgun before dove hunting starts. And then when we check you in the field, there's times where I've checked folks that have an unplugged shotgun, and we do write citations on that. So just make sure you got your plugs in your shotgun, and especially if you buy a gun new from a sporting goods store or from a private vendor or individual, that gun doesn't have a plug in it before you go out and use it. No shooting from public roads or shooting birds from power lines. So this is a couple things that I see quite a bit of during dove season, as folks will travel up and down public roads. And a public road in Colorado would be anything that's accessible to the public. So it doesn't have to be a highway or a concrete county road. Anything that's accessible to the public for travel is considered a public road. So no shooting from the public roads or over them, and no shooting the birds that are perched up on top of the power lines. Hip numbers. So on your hunting license, when you purchase it for small game hunting, it's going to have some information on the license regarding HIP, which stands for Harvest Information Program. So each year before you go hunting the first time for migratory game birds, you have to call in and get your HIP number. Again, it's a one-time deal. You have to call it once a year before the first day, before you hunt the first day for migratory birds in Colorado. It's going to be either an online survey through the website that's on your license, or you can call a 1-800 number and go through a series of about 12 questions. And they're going to ask you questions about what you plan on hunting in Colorado for that current year regarding migratory birds and a few other animals. And at the end of the survey, they're going to give you a 12-digit number that applies to you as the hunter based on your CID number. And then you apply that number to your hunting license, in the appropriate spot on the license, you'll have your 2020, 2021 HIP number, and write that HIP number on your license. And again, you just have to call that number once a year before you go out and hunt for the first time for migratory game birds. Hunter education cards. So for those of you who have taken a formal hunter education class prior to today, you'll know that they're orange in color, and they're specific for you as a hunter. So unless you've taken that hunter education card into a Colorado Parks and Wildlife Service Center with some form of identification and have that hunter education card verified, you'll need to have that hunter education card on you while you're actively hunting. Again, you can go into a Colorado Parks and Wildlife Service Center and have it verified, bring in some ID, and then every license that we print after that will show your hunter education card number on the license, and it'll have a V at the end of your hunter ed card number, and that shows us wildlife officers in the field that are checking hunters that your card has been verified by somebody within our agency, and you don't necessarily have to have it on you while you're hunting. If it hasn't been verified yet, you have to have your hunter education card on you while you're hunting. And that is all I have for basic regulations.
There's a lot of different ways to hunt doves, and you don't have to be out before the sun comes up real early to do it. They like to wait till that morning chill comes off and it warms up just a little bit. But those doves will go out and they'll go get some food first thing out of the roost. So they sleep all night in the roost trees and go find some food, whether that's some sort of a grain, typically a grain, whether it's wheat or sorghum or some sort of millet. They like alfalfa fields. If you find some prairie areas, especially with grazing, and you see those kind of foot and a half tall flowers, white flowers, it's called snow on the mountain. The doves love that. It's high in protein and very nutrient rich for doves. So they go and they'll feed on that right away, and then they'll go to water and get some water. So when I go dove hunting in the morning, I like to go out and find somewhere, if there's some water around, maybe a fence post or some old trees around, maybe a stock tank or some sort of a playa or some sort of groundwater, and hang out there as those birds come in. They come from feeding, they come in and get some water, especially if there's some gravel nearby so they can access the gravel. And then you've got the water is a big thing for dove hunting, especially in the morning time. So as the day progresses and it starts to warm up, those birds will go to those roost trees where there's a lot of shade and they can stay out of the heat. So moving or having access to those roost trees, especially kind of at 8 o'clock in the morning, 9 o'clock in the morning till about midday, is a good place to be as well, so that you can get those birds as they're going to shade. The other nice thing about midday, especially when it's hot here in northeastern Colorado or southeastern Colorado as well in September, is when it's hot, those birds, since they're a lot of times they're ground dwellers and nesters as well. If you have some shortgrass prairie with some sand sage and moderate length grasses, you can actually go for a walk across the pasture or across the prairie in the middle of the day and kick up a bunch of doves, similar to pheasant hunting, and have some pretty good success doing that as well, especially when it's hot and the birds are not very active and not moving around very much in flight. Then again in the evening, as it starts to cool down, finding those roost trees and finding some water as they go to get more water before the evening. One thing that works very well, but is definitely not a requirement, is dove decoys. And dove decoys they're pretty inexpensive. And Brian, if you want to bring your screen back up, maybe you can show off some of the decoys as I'm talking. But this is one of the more popular ones, as movement has become more and more popular, especially with bird hunting, both dove hunting and waterfowl hunting. This is the robo duck, or the mojo duck, or dove, sorry. So Very popular and very, very effective. I like to set one out, like if I'm hunting water, especially in the afternoon, I like to set it out next to the pond, and that stake, you can see that the stake is on. You can just drive that into the mud next to the pond and find a place to hide, and the doves just come right into that movement of those wings. I also like to be able to set a couple of regular decoys, dove decoys, whether it's on a fence or on some old dead tree branches in a tree that I'm setting under. And the doves will key in on those, and they'll come right into the decoys that you're hunting under. Now, this decoy that Brian has right now is actually just a paper cutout, and it's actually in the walk-in atlas as a resource that CPW puts out to hunters, that you can just cut that out. And it looks like Brian maybe has laminated his, so he gets more use out of it. And just a little binder clip, you can clip it to a fence or a tree branch, or even as light a weight as that one is, some taller grasses and stuff like that. So decoys are very effective, and overall in the decoy world, very inexpensive in relation to some of the other decoys out there, like duck and goose decoys. I've also hunted with people that have not purchased the Mojo dove, but did happen to have a Mojo duck decoy, and it's the movement so much more than it is the size or shape of the decoy at that point. So a robo duck decoy seems to work just as well, and we've shot a lot of ducks, or sorry, a lot of doves over those robo duck decoys as well. And that's not to say that you have to have a decoy. For a long time, I hunted doves and never had a decoy. And finding a good place to hang out where you've got some water and some roost trees and some gravel nearby, which in eastern Colorado, that pretty much covers most of it. If you can find the water, is probably the hardest part to find out here. But you can really get the birds coming in both morning and evening, and a lot of times midday as well. So you don't have to have extravagant decoys. You don't even have to have a decoy. It's not required. It's not anything like duck hunting is a lot more difficult without duck decoys, but dove hunting doesn't have to be. So there's a lot of different avenues for you to pursue with decoys as far as that goes. Couple other things you can use is glasses. I know a lot of people, when we go hunting, we wear regular sunglasses, and that's good, but those make kind of everything darker. So if you wear like a shooting glass, and they can be fairly inexpensive and simple as well, but as something like a yellow or an amberish red tint, or even your polarized sunglasses that kind of brighten everything while it dampens the UV colors, that'll help a lot. So I think as far as tips and tactics, that would probably kind of cover it. Make sure you're staying low, stay out of the sunlight. I know Mike mentioned earlier, you know, camouflage and drab colors is a good way to do it. And it definitely is. Not a requirement, but avoid the bright colors and find places to kind of hide, whether it's in the shadows or next to a tree or something like that, but also never losing sight of the safety aspect of it, and never letting go of paying attention to where all your other hunters are around you. So, and with that, I'll talk a little bit later about places to go, and we can move on from there.
Hey, thank you, Todd. Good information. I don't know how many of you were able to see me holding up some of the decoys, but hopefully some of you could see me in the side screen there. So we got a couple of questions that came up that I was hoping that either Todd or Mike might want to handle live real quick. One of the questions, how far do you need to be from a public road to shoot? Would one of you want to, looks like Todd's got that one.
Yeah, so with the shotgun, there's not a set distance. You have to be off of the public road, including the shoulder. So there's not a set distance. The set distance of 50 feet from the center line is with a centerfire rifle. So if you're off of the road and off of the traveled portion with a shotgun, that is sufficient unless you're hunting in an area with a specific law or regulation attached to that area.
Great. For all the new hunters that are out there, just a reminder, your shot is not allowed to travel over a public road as well. So if you're thinking sometimes shot might go 200-300 yards from where you're shooting, even though your target's only 20, 30, 40 yards, if you get the right angle, that shot can travel a long way. So make sure when you set yourself up, you're setting yourself in an area where you are not shooting 300 yards towards a public road out there. So that's good. I got another quick regulations question. If Mike, if you want to handle this one, the question is, we live on an acre in unincorporated Douglas County. Can we hunt the doves in our yard, or where do we find out if we can? And maybe you can kind of just talk as well about maybe your suggestion if that's a good thing to try hunting doves out there.
Yeah, so it's an acre of land, so that's going to be a pretty small amount of property to be able to hunt. If you can imagine, most subdivisions in town are a quarter acre, so you basically look at 4 homes next to each other, and that's your acre of property. I would bet your shot would probably travel outside that acre or very close to it, and maybe your neighbors may not be too happy with that. But if you're in an unincorporated county, the first thing you may want to do is check with your county and just make sure, verify that you can actually discharge a firearm or bow in that location. And most counties in the state, not all, will allow that if you're exempted, like in your tax portion of your ownership of that property. If you're listed as agriculture, they would allow that, but you would want to check with your county on that one.
Great, thank you, Mike. All right, I think we're caught up on most questions. We've either answered them to everybody or not. So looking on our agenda, I believe we are going to talk about safety with Justin.
Hey guys, hopefully you all can hear me. My internet has been a little bit shaky. Am I sounding okay, Brian?
Yep, you sound good.
Awesome. I believe that Pepper may be throwing up a slide that just kind of outlines some of the safety topics that are important to remember. Obviously, we have all of our basic usual hunting safety tips, like know your target, know your firing lane, always know what's beyond your target, and don't shoot at any angles or in any direction where you believe there are other hunters, just kind of the typical normal, usual things to go over. But there are some unique aspects that really pertain to dove hunting. Often, depending on what area of the country you're in, you can be very heavily crowded. There can be dozens of dove hunters within a small acre area. They may not be from your group, and you may not even know them or know exactly where they're located. So having your own predetermined shooting lane when you're going out there in a group or with other people, and making sure that you're keeping within that safe shooting lane is always really important. There are a number of wildlife areas and state parks that offer reservations that actually have blinds that you're assigned. And some of those, including I think it's Bar Lake State Park, they actually have a map laid out of the specific shooting lanes that you're allowed to shoot in from those specific blinds that be located in. And that just tried to reduce any crossfire or somebody accidentally getting hit. I know that some other panelists talked about it. We do usually wear a lot of camouflage and you want to stay hidden. But depending on the area that you're in, there are certain, again, reservation areas where they do require you to carry hunter orange with you, so that when you're actually going out into the field to retrieve downed birds, you can toss on that hunter orange cap and protect yourself a little bit more. Even in areas where I'm not required to carry the hunter orange, I still always have a vest or a hat hidden away in one of my bags, so that when I'm going in and out of the field, I'm able to toss that on and protect myself a bit better. Todd also talked about it, hunting the fields and things like that. If you are more mobile and moving around and you aren't actively trying to decoy the doves, that's another good time to wear hunter orange, because you're more pheasant hunting, and that's often when you'd be wearing it anyhow. Just another level of safety. Todd also mentioned eye protection. I have been peppered by shotgun pellets quite a few times while dove hunting. Never injured, never broke any skin, but when you're looking up in the air, you do want to be able to protect your eyes from any of those falling pellets and things like that. So your typical sunglasses or field glasses will work pretty darn well there. Let's see if I hit all these. Safe shooting zones, I covered that. Just having open communications with the other hunters in the field. Try to be friendly and just let people know where you're at and identify your zone. Group hunting, again, is pretty typical. Just stay in communication with your group and make sure you know where the other members of your group are going. Let people know when you're going to be going out into the field to retrieve a downed bird, so they won't be shooting your direction. Things like that. Shooting angles is also a really important one. We tend to always want to take shots further up in the, in the sky. You don't want to be shooting low or below brush or cover, just because you don't know if anybody's sitting there. Don't know if there's any dogs out there wandering around. And also, if you get into physics with trajectory and velocity and all that stuff, I'd much rather have pellets falling down from above with a much lower velocity versus having them shot directly at me. So that's also helpful to protect you and other people in the field. Obviously, always keep your gun unloaded when you aren't actually actively hunting, when you're going in and out of the field. Always make sure that you keep the action open and are able to display that you aren't actually packing any heat or you don't have it fully loaded. Finally, ear protection is another one. Depending on how hot and heavy the action is, a lot of people do like to use some sort of ear protection. It's a lot of shots, and it can be, if the action is really heavy, it can definitely damage your ears, but at the same time, being able to keep your hearing available so you can hear other people approaching or other hunters or passers-by in your area, kind of weighing the cost benefits of that is also important. I think that about covers it for safety, unless you have anything else, Brian.
I think that's great. Thank you for sharing all that. Just follow up on some thoughts, right? Like, there's a lot of hunters out there, and they have every right, just like you do, to be out in the field. So some of the public lands might get a little bit crowded, especially opening weekend. So find ways to share the woods, share those properties, and yeah, be kind. It's not worth getting upset. You know, if someone walks in on your hunting area, we're all out there to have fun. So thank you for sharing that, Justin. We're going to move in next. Todd's going to talk about where to hunt, and this may be probably one of the most, well, safety is probably the most important. Regulations is pretty important, but we're going to have Todd talk, and if for some reason Todd's not able to share his screen, I might just pop in and share a screen that has like some of our websites. So I might hit some of the little things that Todd talks about, but I think we're going to try and have Todd talk and share his screen. So Pepper, if you would mind shutting down your share screen, and we'll get Todd talking about where to hunt.
All right, Brian, are we still good? I tried my video again this time. Are we all right?
So far you're sounding good, Todd.
Okay. All right. So there's a lot of places to go, but I like to go places near ag fields, like I said, with water and roost trees. And a lot of times like out here, the South Platte River bottom, a lot of those state wildlife areas aren't necessarily the best places to go, because there are better places out there that have more ag and more short grass type of prairie around them, which is better habitat for doves than the tall grasses and the dense vegetation of the river bottom. So all the state wildlife areas have regulations on them, and it pertains to occupancy and safety most of the time. So if you want to hit the state wildlife areas, please just look up the regulations before you go. And if you have questions about those regulations, to call a CPW office and get clarification before you go out. Another great resource for hunters is what's called the Walk-in Access Program. And if you're not familiar with the Walk-in Access Program, basically CPW has gone out and acquired access to private property, which we've deemed as good, huntable habitat for certain species. And a lot of it is very good dove hunting. A lot of my best dove hunting I do on walk-in access properties, just going out and finding them. So there's a few things to remember with walk-in access. Is when you go to a walk-in access property and they're all signed and they're in a brochure. In fact, we put out brochures just like this with the walk-in access, the atlas, and inside of there's maps that display all of the certain parcels that hunters can go and access. But one huge thing to remember is that you are hunting on private property, and you have permission because it's enrolled in our walk-in atlas program, and it is still private. So we still have to be very, very respectful of that property, not leaving our shotgun shell hulls, not leaving our granola bar wrappers or our water bottles, not damaging fences or any of the existing infrastructure that may be on those properties, leaving gates as you find them, whether that's open or closed. But it's a very valuable opportunity for the residents of Colorado to be able to hunt in places where we might not be able to hunt. And it spreads out the hunter distribution as well. So it's a very, very good place, a very good resource for us. As far as finding which ones to hunt and where to go, a lot of scouting. So get your walk-in atlas and find an area that you think you want to go look, and then go scout it out and figure out which places you might want to dove hunt and which places you don't want to dove hunt. There's other resources available, like Onyx. Onyx has become a very popular and overall very reliable resource for hunters as well. It tells you whether properties are public or private. It lists our walk-in access properties on it, and it's something that you can use on your phone in real time in the field as well, using GPS. And also, you know, if you have questions or you need recommendations, to call your CPW office, whether it's the brush office, Fort Collins, Denver, Durango, wherever, to call and make sure that you utilize CPW as a resource so that we can help you find good places and places that you should be, instead of avoiding any places that may be confusing and end up in properties that are not actually open. So if anybody else wants to throw in anything as far as places to hunt or access, I would just say that if you go to a wildlife area, that's what they are there for. Remember that they're open for everybody, and a lot of other uses other than just dove hunting or whatever type of hunting you might be doing. And they get a lot of use. but also to make sure that you check with the regulations before you go. Whether some properties may be reservation, you have to have a reservation to hunt there first, or that some properties might not be open until certain times of the year. So again, if any of the other panelists have anything you want to throw in on that, please do.
I was going to add, Todd, there are a few state parks out there. I believe Bar Lake allows some hunting on it. And I'm not sure about Boyd, but I know Bar Lake does. So look at your state parks as well, because you might be able to hunt some doves and other species there.
Yeah, absolutely. There are places at Jackson Lake that allow hunting, and there's 2 state wildlife areas adjacent to the park as well. And it's still good weather, so it's a good time to go camp at your state park and hunt either walk in, or if the park allows it, or adjacent state wildlife areas as well. Thank you, Pepper.
And I'd just like to add, not necessarily to places to go, but just something that Todd mentioned regarding being respectful of the properties you're hunting on, whether it's a state wildlife area, state trust land, BLM, Forest Service, or even your own private landowners to give you permission, is make sure that you bring some means of a trash bag or something to put your garbage in, and not clean your birds on our properties, especially in the parking lot areas. I'll see a lot of people that pluck feathers off the breasts of these birds, leave the intros laying around, and you're potentially going to be attracting some predators to that area: raccoons, foxes, coyotes. But more importantly, the non-hunting sector may see some of that stuff and kind of pin that against us as hunters being non-ethical and just kind of slobby in the field. And your landowner is going to be upset with it. And at least on our properties, state wildlife areas and state trust lands, it is lawful to litter, and we would consider remains of animals, bird parts, feathers, and intros as littering. So please just make sure you bring a trash bag for those items and then dispose of those things when you get back to your place of residence.
That's some great advice. When I go small game hunting, waterfowl hunting, I have a little, just a small little plastic box, and I've got all sorts of stuff in there, from Ziploc bags to put game in. I got extra trash bags to throw all that stuff in. Maybe some game shears, a knife, something to clean my hands up with. A little of everything. So it's just my field dressing kit that I take out there in the field. So that's some good advice out there. On the chat, I have shared with all of the attendees several different website links, some of the stuff that Todd was talking about from the Colorado Hunting Atlas, and a link to our small game page, where when our brochures are coming out, the walk-in access brochures, when those come out, those will be available. The Hunting Atlas will show those walk-in access properties too, which will be a great tool, but they won't come out until the brochure is ready to go. So that should be here pretty quick, I believe. I expect in the next week or two we ought to have the small game walk-in atlas should come out. So so there's a couple of questions we got going on here. Hello, Sulav. I hope you're still on, my friend. If I'm going on an unknown place to hunt, do you have any tips for e-scouting for doves before putting boots on the ground? I think Todd hit a little bit of that, and it is tough, but I always look for the habitat, right? I look for some perches nearby. I look for agricultural crops nearby. I look for some source of water. When I look for water, I'm looking for something that doesn't necessarily have vegetation growing tall right up next to the edge. Seems to me doves don't like being in cover. They like to be in real short grass when they get water. I think it's so that they can see predators approach rather than trying to hide from them. I think that's where I tend to see them. But if you kind of think about a dove and when it's moving, you can look at aerial imagery, which is on our hunting atlas. You can see some of the tree rows. That might be a perch that they use. Maybe they got water nearby, but also to look at, do you have enough farmers fields in the area, and where you place yourself out there, you might be looking for that flyway as they go from one habitat part to another. But there's nothing better than getting boots on the ground out there to look at it. So do a little e-scouting ahead of time, and have, like, 3, 4, 5 different areas that maybe you want to try out. And when you show up on site, you may think this isn't a great place. The other thing you can do midday, maybe the doves aren't quite so active, but you can drive the roads. You can find doves that are perched on those power poles, those power lines. And if you know the doves are there, they're probably in the area. So there's some habitat nearby. Maybe there's some properties that you can hunt in that area as well. So we got another question. Are OHVs permitted in state wildlife areas? I think most of the areas they are not, but I don't know if Todd or Mike or Pepper want to answer that question. Maybe some state wildlife areas where they are allowed.
The majority of state wildlife areas, they're not going to be allowed, but then again, it's just a matter of going back into the recreational lands brochure. If they are allowed, it's only going to be on established roads. And usually those are the areas that are larger expanse properties. Your walk-in access properties obviously are walk-in access only. So anywhere that I know of, as far as dove hunting goes, you're going to be limited to just walking, no ATVs allowed. Does that help?
Yeah, Todd or Mike, you have anything else to add to that?
Properties out here in Area 3, so everything from Morgan County east, Phillips, Logan, Washington, and Yuma counties, we don't have any of our state wildlife areas that would allow for use of ATVs. And that's a really good point to go with the walk-in access. Is walk-in access is foot access only, no vehicles, no horseback, nothing motorized. It's only walk-in, and that is because partially because of the private property aspect of that. So one thing to reiterate there, but also just to go back to what Pepper said, is making sure you're double checking the regulations with the property that you want to go to see if you can use those. But for the most part, most of the wildlife areas, especially east of I-25, where you're going to be encountering your better dove hunting, you're not going to be able to access with a ATV or UTV.
Great, thanks. So we don't have any active questions going right now, but if some attendees are out there and you've got questions that we haven't really talked about right now, go ahead and type them in and submit them. We'll take a couple of minutes and maybe we can answer a couple questions right now. Otherwise, that is our presentation tonight. I hope you get excited about dove hunting. Just remember, when you get started hunting any species, right, you got to really learn that species. You got to study that species. You got to get excited about it. So it takes a bit of an investment. I do encourage you, before dove season starts, get out to the range and practice. I really like the sporting clays. If you can find a range that has sporting clays, and look for those shots, right? Those opportunities where you got the fast crossing shots, right to left, left to right, so you can start establishing lead. These doves are such a fast species, and you might go out in the field with a couple of boxes of shotgun shells. 25 might not be enough to go out there. So maybe a couple of boxes at least. They're hard to hit. The other thing is they're hard to find. So if you can find a place that has a lot of habitat elements, also think about where you set yourself down. So maybe you don't have a whole lot of heavy cover in front of you, because when that little bird goes down and it goes down in that heavy cover, it can be very challenging to recover those birds. So instead of trying to get doubles or triples, hit one bird, mark where it's at, try and go get a safe recovery right away, so that we don't waste birds without recovering them. So, all right, we got a couple of questions coming in, and we're going to just throw these out to anyone on the panel that wants to answer them. If you're on the Front Range, it sounds like heading east of 25 is where the dove habitat is. Not too much heading into the mountains. Yep, that you got it. Most of the best dove habitat is going to be east. Think about where agricultural crop fields are going to be, and that's going to be east. Some of the best hunting is, yeah, you may be driving a couple hours east. I know up in Mike's territory up north, there's some areas that have plenty of agriculture, and I've seen plenty of doves up north on some of the state wildlife areas and some of those areas. But yeah, you're going to probably be going someplace that has a lot of farm fields out there. So, another question: what about taking a significant other who is wheelchair bound? What are we limited to on that? I'm gonna see if there's an officer that wants to provide some advice to that. Thank you, Todd.
I can try it. I guess as far as taking a significant other that's wheelchair bound, most wildlife areas, because they're primitive, we don't necessarily have like ADA standard wheelchair access to them, because they're just dirt trails and that kind of thing. So it depends on how much access is required for that person. We still encourage it as much as possible. And if you get into a place or you think you've found some places or you need more specific help with that, I think if you're going to come out to, if you're going to go and visit Mike or some of Mike's properties in Weld County, you would get in touch with Mike. Or if you were going to come to Morgan County, you would get in touch with me, and we have ways that we can accommodate helping folks get into parts of the wildlife area and get set up to hunt. But we try to do that on a case-by-case specific individual basis, where I would just refer people to get in touch with the local CPW office, and they'll put you in touch with the local CPW officer and try and work those out individually for the most part.
Great. Great, thank you. We got one question that was out before, talking about the HIP number, talking about some species, some specific species. You got to get an additional, either a permit or you got to get another number for that. Mike, I assume,
Yeah.
Can you handle that one?
Yeah, so I covered that portion, and I might have been a little confusing on my explanation of that, but the HIP number again is you call it in once a year, and they're going to ask a standard set of questions. Things like, do you plan on hunting band-tailed pigeons in 2020, 2021? If yes, press 1. If no, press 2. Do you plan on hunting sandhill cranes in 2020, 2021? If yes, no, and you'll have a series of numbers to press for your answer. So you can't necessarily add a species to your HIP number. It's just a set number of questions. And the survey is really based on certain species of animals that we want to get an idea of how many people are on the ground potentially hunting them that current year, so we can better allocate our resources, money that we have for habitat projects and so forth that are included in that harvest information program number that you call.
Okay. So if you're interested in a band-tailed pigeon, I believe there's a $5 additional permit charge, but there's a band-tail number from HIP. The sandhill cranes, and is there one other species that maybe you'll get a special number to write on your license for?
That's the two that come to mind on my end as far as what's on the license. They're separate from the HIP number, so
Yeah.
you'll get a separate registration number for band-tailed pigeons and for sandhill cranes if you decide to hunt those birds.
Okay. Hopefully that makes some sense. Again, if you're like, I don't know if I can remember all this is confusing, right? This is why we have the small game and waterfowl brochure. We've got all the information that you need to know before you go hunt is in these brochures. We try to put it in a way that hopefully it makes some sense. If you read through it and it's still confusing, we have office numbers on the first inside page of the brochures. It has all the office numbers. And if you call during office hours, we got customer service agents that have been trained. They've heard every single question in the world out there. So they're a great resource for you. So if something doesn't make sense, please call in. So we got another question, and I bet you Todd can handle this one for some reason he might know. But any suggestions on Morgan County? We have hunted a stock water hole tank area, and they didn't really seem to be there. Todd, do you have any suggestions on maybe some different habitat or some things that you can direct them on?
Yeah, so one thing, if you're hunting stock water tanks, that's usually pretty good because we're hot and dry out here. And if you're on some sort of water, you're in a pretty good spot. If you're off the river, in this county, if you're off the river, you're probably going to have better dove hunting. If you're in the agricultural areas, either north or south of the river. So if you're on a water tank, you're in a good spot. One thing to remember with doves is they're very, very weather dependent, and their migration is totally driven by cold fronts that we might not necessarily consider a cold front, but a small bird like a dove does. So, right now we're hitting 90s, high 90s every day. I think last night the lowest it got was like 72 degrees, and that was at about 2 a.m. this morning. So we're staying warm, but what usually happens is at the end of August, we get a cold front where it dips down into the 60s or whatever. And you'll see these birds start to bunch up into groups here the next couple weeks. They've already started bunching up. And we get a cold front right at the end of August, and the birds will head out. So folks come out the first couple of days of September expecting a lot of doves, and the doves have migrated out. So usually what will happen, though, is that second week of September, as things heat back up and we stay warm again, we'll get another couple of migrations of birds move through eastern Colorado. So one thing is to stay with it. Hunt later into September, because you'll get multiple migrations through there where that first big push of birds moved out early or right at the beginning, but to stay with it, because some of my best dove hunting has been right around the 10th of September when we get more migrants moving through. But as far as in Morgan County, hit the walk-in stuff south of Brush. The stuff north of Brush does not get hunted very often, and there's a lot of dryland wheat. There's not as much water up there, but there's still usually plenty of birds up there. And if you're on a water tank, really, I would stick with that until you could scout something else out.
Great. Yeah, good advice. Got a question. Any favorite ways to prepare dove? The whole reason we go hunt, right, is we want to go, we want to harvest them, but we want to eat them, right? And they taste fantastic. Do you want to take that one? Do you have a favorite recipe there, Mike?
Well, a couple I have real quick is just breasting the bird out, and I like it bacon wrapped, just with a wrap of bacon on it, maybe some crushed pepper on top of that. And for any barbecue lovers, maybe just a little slab of barbecue sauce on top when you put them on the grill. I also like them in jalapeno poppers, so I'll just slice jalapeno in half and put some cream cheese inside the half of the jalapeno once you get all the seeds and the seed vein out. And then place your dove breast on top of the jalapeno and cream cheese and wrap that in bacon all around the jalapeno, and then put a little bit of barbecue sauce on top of that and grill it for about 45 minutes, and that's pretty tasty.
That's awesome. I'm gonna throw this out to Justin. I don't know if Justin has any favorite ways besides dove jalapeno poppers. Justin's been texting us. I think he's without power, yet he's still hanging in there. So thank you for sacrificing and staying on. But Justin, you got any favorite recipes for dove? Justin, I don't hear you. Maybe you don't have that access at the moment. All right, so we'll go on. There's another question here. Is there a preference for non-toxic shot? They're not waterfowl, so it's technically illegal to use lead shot, right? That is correct. But steel is preferred just to keep lead out of the environment. You know what? You can make some good choices out there. There are plenty of non-toxic shot options out there for you. I am myself considering switching completely to a non-toxic shot for when I go, the shot for my shotgun, but also for my rifle. So there's a lot of good options that are out there right now. So if you go to a store that's selling hunting ammo, you can talk with some of the folks there, but you can start looking through and you know, there's some options. Steel's going to be cheap. It behaves a little bit different than lead on it, but steel will still work fine for you out there in the field. But yeah, there's some options out there. And let's see, we got a question, and this will have to be for an officer because I don't know this one. Can I use a DIY dove trap in Colorado out of trapping season? I don't know if I've ever heard of that question before.
Yeah, I just answered that question. Just writing out, it's using traps is not a legal method of take for small game birds at any point in Colorado.
All right, we got an answer on that. We got this is the last question. I think we'll be closing down the webinar here in just a sec, but would you recommend hunting a water hole in the AM or PM or both? Anyone want to take that? I know Todd is quite the dove hunter. Todd, you or Mike, either one of you guys got a good recommendation on that?
Personally, you know, I've seen it go both ways. During hot conditions, I've hunted near water in the mornings. They may be down on the ground near the water looking for insects, grasshoppers, things like that. But more so in the late evening, afternoon, they're going to want to go to some water and get some water. Typically, like Todd said, they're going to come off the roost in the morning. They're going to want to feed in some grain fields, get some grain insects in their belly. And then they'll probably go to a roadside or where there's going to be some open gravel and to get some gravel in that gizzard to start breaking down the food items that they just ate. And then they'll go to water midday or late afternoon.
Anyone else have some final thoughts on dove hunting?
I just say get out there and try it.
Yep, you're not going to shoot any doves if you're sitting at home. So you got to get out there. Don't be frustrated if you're not harvesting those buggers. They're tough. They're tough. They'll put a good hunter to shame. So, yeah. What other ideas?
Ammo and leave your ego at home. You're gonna miss, and that's okay. So, I know a lot of guys that still miss.
Yeah, I'd second that. You know, I've shot a lot of doves in my life, but they're quick. They don't make a lot of noise as far as vocal sounds in the air like a goose or duck. So sometimes they just appear out of nowhere. But the season is really long. So again, it's September 1st till the end of November for your mourning dove and white-winged dove, and then Eurasians are year-round. So for you true novice hunters out there that are wanting to get the shotgun in the field, get some exercise, the days are still going to be long in that fall season. Sometimes we get cold snaps, you know, in mid-September. They may push some of the mourning doves out of the state momentarily, but it's a great time of the year to get out and try hunting when it's relatively warm and you have a very long season to partake in that hunting activity versus your typical 9 or 5-day big game hunt.
Yeah, it's a lot of, I enjoy dove hunting. There's a lot of excitement, a lot of fun. Yeah. So I think that is, I think we've covered quite a bit for Dove 101. We've had a lot of attendees that have already signed off. So we sure hope that you've learned something, that you've got some excitement about dove hunting. We hope you get time to get to the range. That'll definitely help you before you get out there hunting. Range time is super important to build confidence in establishing lead on a crossing shot. Oftentimes you get those crossing shots. So get out to the range and practice those. The other thing, right, like just enjoy the time out there, right? Whether you come home skunked or not, that's okay. Just enjoy the time and just know that every time you go out, you're learning something new. You know, get out there ahead of time. You can prepare to identify doves. You know, like Pepper talked about earlier, you got to identify doves. Just go start taking a walk down your parks. Look for some of those ponds, lakes, waterways that maybe the doves are out there, and start identifying them. Walk with your eyes open, looking for movement and ID, but also walk with your ears open. I love hearing the little whirring wings as a dove comes by. So sometimes you can identify them. Where are they? Right. So get excited, spend the time and invest in it. Watch out for those non-target birds that look like a dove. So make sure you identify them properly. Right. Practice it before the season starts. So with that, I think we are going to sign off. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today. And good luck out there in the field. Shoot straight. Thank you.